Is a murder ballad what it sounds like? Because murder ballad sounds like either a really good punk band name, or it literally sounds like you're talking about the ballad structure, but talking about like murders. Is that what it is, or does it mean something else specific?
No, that's exactly what it is. It's a story about a murder, and it was a really popular form of folk ballad for years. It is barely anywhere now. Like nobody is writing new murder ballads except for maybe Coulter Wall, and maybe a few other folks. But the murder ballad is a really interesting song form in that you are basically telling the story of a violent crime taking place, whether that's for good or for bad. Most times in murder ballads, it's a male committing the crime and then feeling regretful at the end. Like historically, that's what a murder ballad is. Stacko Lee is a murder ballad about a guy who gets angry because somebody stole his Stetson hat. And then he kills that guy for stealing his Stetson hat. He gets arrested, goes to jail, then regrets it all because he's about to be hanged for his crimes. Same thing with Down in the Willow Garden, which is about a guy who kills the woman who he's courting because his father said it was a good idea in order to get all of her family's money, but it didn't end up working out for him, and he gets hanged too. And eventually he regrets it. So it's like this common thing in murder ballads of old where the main character kills and then regrets. Uh, I don't always write murder ballads in that way. A lot of times it's just the way that it is, like some sociopath or psychopath does their thing and somebody dies, or I like to sort of turn the traditional murder ballad on its head a little bit, since the woman has pretty much always been the victim in the song. I wrote a song uh, about a woman who is the murderer and doesn't regret it at the end, just sort of always pursuing respect in the song and never getting it. So she never regrets taking lives in the song. And I wrote that way back in 2011. So that's an older song now. But I sort of like messing around with the murder ballad structure because I don't feel like it's used enough and in a way that hasn't been used historically.
So when you're talking about these murder ballad songs, in your opinion, are they meant to be kind of allegories? Where they represent a message that you're supposed to get out of it, some kind of theme or whatever, or do you think they're supposed to be more literal translations? Like, what do you think that the fascination with them is?
I definitely think they used to be more of a an allegory, maybe something where somebody could learn a lesson like, hey, kid, murdering people is bad. Here's a song about how you will regret it. But now we pretty much all know that, right? Like, we don't need to sing songs and tell tales to our kids, telling them not to kill other people. So now it's more of just like a movie. You're just listening to a story unravel before you. You can sort of imagine it play out in your head, just like any true crime podcast or some random television show. It's just the same thing except in music, and that's what's so special about it now is that a lot of people think that it might be a little bit strange, but they're watching these things on the big screen or listening to them on podcasts anyways, so why not have music to it at the same time, which is basically what I love about it.
And that's one of the things that fascinates me about how people interpret different mediums. You know what I mean? Like, 'cause to your point, watching a murder show, whether it's Dateline or whatever it is one thing, but then listening to a song is another, but then reading a story is another. And people interpret the way those things go together very differently. And a great example of that is the controversy that a lot of music gets into for its influence on children, right? Whereas not necessarily the same conversations are had around movies. Now they've been had around books way back when, in some places even burn books, obviously, and there's those who believe that Harry Potter books are witchcraft and those type of things. So you see it in books and you see it in music as well, but you don't see it nearly as much in movies. And I've always found that fascinating to me because, like you said, if a rapper talks about violence, then they're like, oh, that's bad. Same thing possibly for somebody doing a murder ballad and stuff like that. But then Goodfellas wins all these Oscars. uh, The Godfather is recognized as one of the greatest movies of all time. Like, how are those not murder ballads? You know what I mean? How is that any different than anything we're talking about here? It's just a different medium and the same storyline. So you could literally take a song, and I think different artists have done this. You could take the same story, put it in song, then a movie, and then a book, and all three of them would have different reactions. Now, granted, that's going to have something to do with the quality of each individual piece, but it's more so just about how we interpret those different mediums. But to your point, like you said before, it's the same thing as your true crime podcast or anything else you're listening to. If you like it, you should like it in all forms, and at least that's how I feel about a lot of that.
Exactly. And video games, too, is a complete other genre
Mhm.
that gets so much criticism for violence, which has been pretty much debunked. But like these things are all like double standards when violence is just sort of human anyways, and we need to document the human experience, the good and the bad. So I feel like it's important to tell the stories with every form of art that we have available to us as a species, and music is one of them. So if somebody wants to tell a story with violence that's music related, I'm all for it. Like, I got nothing against it in any genre.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree with you more. I think it's important that we try to promote these themes throughout music, movies, and reading in any form that they come in as a way for people to interpret other things. Like to your point, like we talked about in the beginning, a lot of them are allegorical. They're not meant to be literal. Even the Bible is written in a way that a lot of people interpret as allegorical, not necessarily meant to be literal for a lot of the way that it communicates its message. So I think whenever we start to restrict those, like I said, whether it's burning a book or removing a book out of a library for different people, or censoring past works, that I think that's where we start to get into a dangerous territory because when we start doing that, we're taking away our ability to interpret those things. And we're also telling people who enjoy these things they're somehow subversive to mainstream culture. And I don't think any of those things are true. I think it's really what it is a bunch of people being overly worried about information. Like we've seen it so many times throughout history. We're like, somehow, if our kids get this information or our friends get this information, they're going to change who they are fundamentally. It's like, well, if they do that, that probably means they were faking who they were to begin with. Like, I don't know about you, but I don't normally get a little tidbit of information and suddenly go, you know what? Murder does sound fun. I think I'm going to go on a killing spree really quick. Like, if I'm that close to going on a killing spree, something was going to make it happen. Whether it was Scarface the movie, Scarface the rapper, Scarface the book, like one of them was going to get to me in any way, in any form. I don't think you can blame something if I get pushed over the edge that simply.
Exactly. I feel the same way, and I think it could also be argued that it's an outlet too. Like, you're sort of playing
Mhm.
through these things in your mind, or on the screen with a video game, or watching it on a movie, or listening to it on a podcast, and we get so engaged in these things. We get so fearful, so passionate about it that it, maybe we don't feel like starting a fight because somebody cut you off on the road, right? Maybe those things just don't
Mhm.
happen because it's more therapeutic, and you're listening to the murder ballad, you're listening to this violent ballad or this song that's taking place, and you're like, wow, I feel a little bit better just because it feels like I'm the one, or maybe you're singing along with the lyrics, and the person singing, the character singing, is the violent one. And it's just like you're sort of playing that out so you don't have to do it in real life, too.
Eh, I'm right on board with you there, and particularly like I like how you brought up video games, which I don't think get their proper respect yet. They're starting to for what to me is one of the most immersive and unique ways to tell stories. They are just so incredibly interactive. There's a video game called Senua's. I think it's Senua's Sacrifice, and it's supposed to be about this Viking woman who is going through a lot of mental health challenges on the process of trying to basically grieve her lost lover who was killed. And so in the literal sense, you're playing through this game trying to save his soul and try to like fight to bring him back or whatever. But the way that the game was put together and the way that they think about it was actually that she's having a lot of mental health illnesses directly related to the trauma of losing her lover and everything like that. And so you have a lot of that. You have these whispering voices. If you wear headphones when you play it, it's kind of disorienting because there's all these whispering voices that are constantly talking to you and they're like mocking her and doing all these different things or whatever. And it's like you're not getting that in a movie or book or even music, because it combines all these senses and then adds in the layer where you're actually making choices and controlling part of it, so it brings you that much more in. And I just think that other mediums can't necessarily do that. And once we really start to respect what video games can be, we'll stop pretending that they're all knockout guys or fallout guys, whatever that, I forget what that game that got popular for like 2 months last year was called. But there's just a lot to that, and I love it. So what I would like to see you do, and this I'm going to put a challenge to you for the next 5 to 10 years of your career, is you take one of your murder ballads and then you get with like a developer who's making a video game and you like make it immersive, so like your song comes on at the perfect moments and stuff like that, like a Red Dead Redemption type thing. That I'd love it.
That would be so cool. I love where you're going with that, and in fact, I've already thought about it for my next project, um, and mapping it out. I'm trying to figure out how I'm actually going to do that. But what you said there with the video games, I've noticed too with the storytelling and how they actually bring the story to life to the individual. So you have
Mhm.
all of these choices as you're playing a modern video game, and you can choose what direction your character goes. Like, do you want to go a bad route? Do you want to go a good route? And then at the end, you have alternate endings. Like, you could go on YouTube and
Mhm.
see Red Dead Redemption and watch all the four endings or five or however many endings there are, because based off of your decisions in the game makes the game end different. So you have a story there. And I want to do that with an album, and I want to make a bunch of sort of different songs where you choose your own adventure, right? So you can do this in
Oh, that'd be
YouTube,
awesome.
and I'm trying to figure out how I want to set it up in YouTube, because basically with the use of the end screen, I can make it so that there's a song, and then at the end of the song I have 20 seconds for the viewer or listener to decide what they want to do next. And they can tap on one or another choice. And then that takes them down a different path. Or maybe at the end of that song, it brings them back to that path. And then at the end, you have four different endings or whatever it is. And then if you wanted to, you could start back at the beginning and say, okay, what happens if I make this decision? Where does the album go from there? And of course, you
Mhm.
need like 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 songs to make that possible. But I think it's going to be a fun project, and eventually I want to do something like that. So I'm already thinking about it. Uh, it's still way too early to say anything, but I'm right there with you on the fact that it's possible to create an immersive decision making storytelling experience in music with an album. It's so exciting.
I think this conversation answers the question of like, what would Christopher Nolan look like if he made music? And here we go. This is exactly how he would put this together too. There'd be all these twists and multiple endings and all this stuff, and then there'd be all these fan theories. You're like, but if you listen in the background of this one part, you hear a train whistle. So I think what's actually happening there, and like all these conspiracy theories that people jump off on, and I love it. That is one of the cool things to me about where we are with a lot of the art that we're creating, right? Whether it's video games, movies, TV shows, or anything like that. Like Netflix had the Black Mirror episode last year. I think it was called Balderdash, or I don't remember what it was called, and it's probably not that at all. And I probably just made that up. But they had that episode where, in real time, as you're watching it, choices pop up on the screen, and you only have like a few seconds to pick, and it significantly changes the story. Like people will die, or the story ends earlier and stuff like that. And so doing something like that with music sounds like a really, really cool concept to me, because I'm thinking about songs that I'm aware of that have storytelling in it. What if the guy doesn't choose to do this, do the murder, and does his life get better? Or is it a weird twist of fate that after he chooses not to murder, then he gets killed somehow by this person or something like that? Like all these type of things. That'd be really cool. So let me know for sure when you do that, because I'm all on board with that. I would love to listen to that.
I'm
So,
excited to make something like that. It would probably be a couple of years at
yeah.
least before I'm able to put that together. But it's definitely in the back of my mind. So I hope I can pull something like that together within the next 5 years.
Thanks for checking out Starting Nowhere. Come find us on Facebook so you can comment on this and other clips and episodes of Starting Nowhere.